America often presents itself to its own people, but just the leaders, when they look in the mirror, I get a sense that we think of ourselves as the good guys. Uh, in especially this begins sometimes to look hypocritical when you're waging war. Is what's a good? Is there a good way to know when you've lost all sense of what it is to be good? Um, Another way to ask that: is there in military policy in conducting war? Is there a good way to know what is a just war and what is a war crime? I mean, in some circles, Kissinger is accused of contributing, being a war criminal.
Yes, and I argue in the book he's not a war criminal, but that doesn't mean that he didn't misuse military power. I think a just war, as Michael Walzer and others write about it, a just war is a war where both the purpose is just and you are using the means to get to that purpose that kill as few people as necessary. That doesn't mean there won't be killing, but as few as necessary. Proportionality, right? Your means should be proportional to your ends. And that's often lost sight of because the drive to get to the end often self-justifies means that go well beyond that. And so that's how we get into torture in the war on terror. Right?
Is there some kind of lesson for the future?
Yes,
that you can take away from that.
Yes, I think the first set of lessons that I've shared as a historian with military decision makers is, first of all, always remember why you're there, what your purpose is, and always ask yourself if the means you're using are actually proportional. Ask that question. Just because you have these means that you can use, just because you have these tools, doesn't mean they're the right tools to use. And here's the question that follows from that. And it's a hard question to ask because the answer is one we often don't like to hear. Are the things I'm doing in war actually doing more harm or more good to the reason I went into war? We came to a point in the war on terror where what we were doing was actually creating more terrorists. And that's when you have to stop.
Well, some of that is in the data, but some of it, there's a leap of faith. So from a parenting perspective, let me speak as a person with no kids and a single guy. Let me be the expert in the room on parenting. No, it does seem that it's a very difficult thing to do to, even though you know that your kid is making a mistake, to let them make a mistake, to give them the freedom to make the mistake.
Sure.
I don't know what to do, but I mean, that's a very kind of light-hearted way of phrasing the following, which is when you look at some of the places in the world, like Afghanistan, which is not doing well.
Right.
To move out knowing that there's going to be a lot of suffering, economic suffering, injustices, terrorist organizations growing, that committing crimes on its own people and potentially committing crimes against allies, violence against allies, violence against the United States. How do you know what to do in that case?
Well, again, it's an art, not a science, which is what makes it hard for an engineer to think about. This is what makes it endlessly fascinating for me.
Yeah.
And I think the real intellectual work is at the level of the art, right? And I think probably engineering at its highest level becomes an art as well, right? So policymaking, you never know. But I will say this: I'll say you have to ask yourself and look in the mirror and say, is all the effort I'm putting in actually making this better? And in Afghanistan, you look at the 20 years and $2+ trillion that the U.S. has put in. And the fact that, as you said correctly, it's not doing well right now after 20 years of that investment. I might like a company that I invest in, but after 20 years of my throwing money in that company, it's time to get out.
Well, in some sense, getting out now is, that's kind of obvious. I'm more interested in how we figure out in the future how to get out earlier. At this point, we've stayed too long, and it's obvious. The data, the investment, nothing is working. It's very little data points to us staying there. I'm more interested in, being in a relation. Let me take it back to a safer place again. Being in a relationship and getting out of that relationship while things are still good, but you have a sense that it's not going to end up in a good place. Yeah. That's the difficult thing.
You have to ask yourself, whether it's a relationship or you're talking about policy making in a place like Afghanistan, are the things I'm doing showing me evidence, real evidence, that they're making things better or making things worse? That's a hard question to ask.
Be honest with yourself.
You have to be very honest. And in a policymaking context, we have to actually do the same thing we do in a relationship context. What do we do in a relationship context? We ask other friends who are observing, right? We ask for other observers. This is actually just a scientific method element, actually, right? That we can't, the Heisenberg principle, I can't see it because I'm too close to it. I'm changing it by looking at it, right? I need others to tell me in a policymaking context, this is why you need to hear from other people, not just the generals, because here's the thing about the generals. They generally are patriotic, hardworking people, but they're too close. They're not lying. They're too close. They always think they can do better.
Yeah.